Welcome to Bible Prayers and Untold Stories, where every whisper verse is truth, and every story brings light to the soul. Let us journey through the sacred words and uncover the wisdom hidden in prayer. St. Peter's Dome appears in the middle of the night. A light rain falls. Golden light from ancient windows filters into the darkness. There are storms that begin not with thunder, but with silence. There are cleansings that do not come from anger, but from a silent hand that replaces a foundation stone. And there are moments in the history of the Church when it is not applause or anger that decides the future, but a nod in the darkness. Vatican, year 1 of Pope Leo XIV. A pope not chosen for the loudest voice, but because he listens to the smallest. No one sees it clearly, but everyone feels it. A wind is moving, a renewal that is not brilliant, but irreversible. Ancient corridors, flickering candles, cardinals passing by, faces pensive, eyes filled with worry. 6 men, 6 chairs that once stood firm under the dome of power. Now they are shaking, not because they are inferior, but because they are no longer pieces of a new picture. And the one who started to redraw that picture, no one else, but the one sitting on the chair of St. Peter. This is not just a matter of personnel. This is a matter of the soul of the Church. It is the moment when an era ends, and another era is opening, with the whisper of God's will. The interior of the Vatican in the early dawn. Silvery light glides gently across the cold stone floor. Each step echoes in the empty corridors. Every pontificate is a door. Some doors open with the sound of a bell, and some open with the first breath of silence. Pope Leo XIV, a man not a stranger to the Vatican, but a stranger to the world. He entered the throne not as a conqueror, but as a guardian. But preserving does not mean keeping the same. To preserve is to know when to put it down, and when to remove it. Files of paper are placed on the old wooden table. Names appear: Gambetti, Semeraro, Farrell. There are chairs that have been under the spotlight for so long that people mistake them for parts that cannot be moved. But Leo XIV does not look at the light of fame. He listens to what is no longer spoken. And the Vatican, in that morning light, becomes a place where the voice is no longer something that is spoken, but something that can no longer be kept silent. Pope Leo sits alone in the empty Sistine Chapel. Candles flicker. A Latin hymn plays softly. He does not ask for strength. He asks for wisdom. For true change in the Church does not come from human courage, but from the moment God chooses to rebuild the foundations. A wall breaks in the darkness. A stone is turned over. Underneath is a cross. A hand with a bishop's ring pulls out a letter, sealed with red wax. A wave is rising, but not on the sea, but in the heart of the Church. Those who were once the guiding lights can now be lamps in need of a new heart. The bells ring at St. Peter's Basilica, not a celebration, but a signal for a change. This is the beginning of a journey, not against what is, but to call what needs to be. 6 cardinals, 6 doors, and a single key in the hands of a pope who does not need to shout to be heard. A large candle was burning. Drops of wax fell on the marble floor. A gentle breeze blew. The flame wavered, but did not go out. Introduction, quiet, profound. There are flames that once lit, but their light belonged only to that moment. When God opens a new path, he does not judge the old light. He only requires that the light be sufficient for today. And then, under the reign of Leo XIV, 3 flames were brought before the altar of discernment. Inside St. Peter's Basilica, where millions of people pass by each year, he was a monk who had lived in poverty. He walked with bare feet and a gentle heart, entrusted with the task of being archpriest of St. Peter's Basilica, where the space and soul of the Church meet, but between the majestic stature of marble and the responsibility of governance, humility becomes too soft. The dome needs more than light. It needs a strong support against the strong winds. A stone pillar worn down, not by mistakes, but by time and a new mission. A small office, full of files on canonizations. A silent face, hands holding the rosary. He is a soul searcher in the lines of biographies. a silent voice in the journey of seeing holiness in everyday life. But the world is changing, and young people do not seek holiness through files. They need a voice that tells miracles in the language of the heart, not just theological norms. Under Leo XIV, holiness is no longer something that is merely affirmed. It is something that must touch the heart. The image of a dry international conference, speeches read from documents, the eyes of the attendees scattered. He was the man who was entrusted to hold one of the most important doors in the world, that most important. Family, laity, young people, the living heart of the church. But instead of opening the door, he keeps the lock. Instead of listening, he manages. In a world where young people are leaving the church every day, the church does not need an official, but a father who knows how to kneel and listen to his children cry. And Leo XIV, the Pope, understood. To keep people, you cannot just build barriers. You must build a table where everyone can eat and break bread together. The 3 candles on the altar, the flame does not go out, but is gently blown out, and maybe it will be put in another place. There are flames that are not extinguished, only put back in their right place. Because when the wind of the Holy Spirit blows, everything, even if it was once strong, must be ready to shake. This is not an elimination. This is a new calling from the one who always demands readiness. An ancient stone building echoes with ancient hymns. Inside, a liturgical text is read in Latin, the voice solemn but no one responds. Introduction, slowly, solemnly. There are words that were once a light to guide the way, but over the years, if not listened to, they become echoes in an empty space. And if there is no discernment, even light can be blinding. And mercy, if not rooted in truth, will become a path without a foothold. Leo XIV does not speak loudly, but he listens deeply. And 3 voices are ringing out too loudly, but are they still appropriate? An old priest is celebrating Mass with a new missal, his eyes sad as he looks at the empty pews. He was entrusted with the treasury of the liturgy, where the Church celebrates its greatest mystery, the Holy Mass. But his decisions, instead of preserving it, were seen as tightening. Tradition was no longer a living stream, but became a stone wall separating generations. Leo XIV understood the value of order, but he also knew order cannot be an excuse to lose the hearts of people. A desk covered with theological books, where sunlight shone through a dusty glass window. He was the spirit behind the Franciscan era, bringing a spirituality of personhood, of encounter, of understanding. But compassion, when it strays from the foundation of teaching, can become a double-edged sword. It draws new paths, but also blurs old boundaries. Leo XIV was not against compassion. He simply asked, what compassion can preserve the spiritual essence of truth? And if the Church is a ship in a storm, he does not want a poet at the helm, but someone who knows how to draw a compass with the blood of martyrs. On one side are the confession lines. On the other side are theological conferences debating the pastoral character of doctrine. The heart of the Church cannot beat only with the times. It must beat with the eternal rhythm of the Sacred Heart. And there, truth does not bend to emotion. The metaphor, 2 candles, one burning brightly but flickering, the other burning steadily but faintly, a hand wavering between the 2. Does spirituality always have to be soft? Is mercy always the first answer? Sometimes it is the strictest discernment that is the greatest mercy. Leo XIV did not choose sides. He chooses balance, with the profound silence of one who knows. Sometimes the most frightening thing is not to get lost, but to go too far, without realizing that the center has been lost. A manuscript is partly burned. Someone is rewriting, not rejecting the old idea, but carefully choosing each new word. Some voices in the Church resonate like bells, but at times that same bell must be taken down to preserve the vault from cracking. No one is eliminated. They are simply invited to step back so that others may step forward in the new light of a new era. Night falls on the Vatican. Yellow lights softly illuminate the silent statues of saints. A room is still lit. The workplace of a man whose name the world does not know, but whose name the church cannot ignore. Introduction, voice soft but powerful. In every dynasty, there is always one man, not on the throne, but holding the final key, not by outward power, but by the silence that knows what to keep and what to let go. And that man, for more than a decade, has been the political heart and diplomatic heartbeat of the Holy See. Cardinal Pietro Parolin. Parolin sits alone in a deserted conference room, looking at a map of the dioceses around the world. On the table are memos, unsent letters, and a worn silver pen. He is the man no one talks about, but the man through whom all decisions must pass. A figure who does not make the news, but who has created stability in a fractured world. Under Pope Francis, he was the one who smoothed out conflicts, who kept the pace of negotiations, keeping the church standing firm against the winds of the world. But Leo XIV was not a bridge builder. He was a pathfinder, a closed meeting. Parolin's eyes met Leo XIV's. No words, just a silent understanding of two souls who serve the same God, but from two different definitions. Parolin was the last image of an era, the era of pastoral diplomacy, of the refusal to confront, of wise compromise. But the world is not what it used to be, and Leo understood that in a polarized age, not to choose sides is to choose indifference. Not to be convinced is to lose your voice. That was not Parolin's fault. It was simply the fate of a man born to keep the peace, but unable to survive the storm. An early morning, Massachusetts Parolin sat in the back row, no longer in the front seat. The light from the glass door fell on his face. Older, quieter. He quietly took out his old rosary. No agenda, only prayer. The night before the storm, there was no wind, only the silence of those who knew they would soon no longer be the protagonists. But it was in that silence that God wrote a new chapter in the history of the church. Parolin was not dismissed. He was given a rest, like a watchman who had kept watch all night, and now handed over the keys to the one who would call the dawn with the sound of a trumpet. Leo XIV walked through the corridor where the popes had walked, but he did not turn around. Behind him a heavy door closed, gently but firmly. Every reform requires a quiet night to prepare for the first bell. And if Parolin is the last of the old era, then tomorrow when the sun rises, the world will know a new Vatican has truly begun. A quiet morning in the Vatican. The morning light streams through the stained glass windows, illuminating an empty altar. There is no one. There is only fire, a newly lit candle. The introduction, echoing like a prayer. When the first fire burned in the bush, Moses bowed his head, not out of fear, but out of recognition. He was standing on holy ground. And today, the Vatican stands on that same ground, not because of the ancient walls, not because of the throne, but because here, a second fire is being lit, not a fire of wrath, but a fire of discernment, a fire that does not consume, but purifies. Empty chairs in a conference room. On the table there was only an open Bible, the wind gently turning the pages. The 6 cardinals, 6 loud voices, were heard. None were condemned. They were simply called back to be silent in prayer. In the church, there are times when service is speaking, but there are also times when service is stepping back so that others can step up voice. Pope Leo XIV, dressed in simple white vestments, knelt in the heart of the empty Sistine Chapel. The soft light from the windows shone on the dome where God was reaching out to touch creation. He was not a pope of grand gestures. He was the keeper of an unquenchable flame in the darkness. He did not come to rule. He came to restore the spiritual order that the world had disturbed. There was no slogan on his lips. In his heart, there was only one prayer, that the church may be one again, not just in structure, but in spirit. A series of images of personnel changes. Empty chairs gradually replaced by new people, younger faces, brighter eyes. A woman carrying a file walked through the Vatican corridor. A black priest spoke to students in the papal courtyard. Change did not come like a whirlwind. It came like the light of dawn, gentle but undeniable. The new ones will not be like the old ones. They do not need to shout. They need to stand firm in a world that is no longer stable. Leo XIV did not rebuild a fortress. He rebuilt a lighthouse so that the lost know where to turn. Pilgrims lined up in St. Peter's Square. Children held crosses. Old people recited the rosary. Leo XIV stepped out to give his blessing. Without saying much, his eyes met the eyes of the world. No sermon, just silence, but people shed tears. The Vatican did not need a revolution. The Church did not need a battle. They only needed one man holy enough not to be afraid of the darkness, and with enough fire to lead others to the light. Back to the first candle, now used to light many others in the church. A sea of light spread. No one knew whose first candle it was, but everyone was enlightened, and that was the second fire, not of one person, but of all who bowed before the Sacred Heart and dared to rise up to keep the faith. The reign of Leo XIV is not a reign of his. It is a reign of silent rebirth. A new church is being born, not with the sound of a trumpet, but with the whisper of the Holy Spirit. Fiat voluntas tua, sicut in caelo, et in terra. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.